actually turn this off. Well, hello. Hopefully everyone can hear me. All right. Looks like we have somebody here. So I'm going to play my introduction song. This, I wanted to play this because so many people were asking me for the name of the song. It is Ian O'Brien Vortex. And yeah, so there you go. Welcome to the show. That is not exactly the way I wanted this introduction to be, but it is what it is. I'm James Rink. I am a super soldier, but we'll probably be talking a few of my experiences because Sean Bond is with us tonight. And let me see here. Sean, there you go. Welcome, Sean. And I'm going to read his bio real quick. And give me a moment here. So Sean Bond has the ability to read blockages in DNA records, past life memories, and he is the founder of the Psionic League and Silver Cord Spiritual Science. So you're going to have to explain about a lot of this stuff in just a bit. He can access DNA technology of the body to track issues back to the point of origin in order to resolve any problem happening to the body, or may be accessed by organic spiritual technology within each individual. He can help assist in creating operating systems to help individuals manifest dormant abilities that unlock their psychic potential and upgrade the body's energy systems. He is also a telepath, remote viewer, psychic surgeon, and Reiki energy manipulator. Sean was in an unacknowledged project in the SSP as a time warrior and healer. He will share a few of his experiences and shed some light on various SSP factions, as well as discuss timelines that have been changed and altered. His contact email is sean_bond@yahoo.com. And of course, you can go to his website at psionicleague.com. And matter of fact, what I will do is, I'm going to just share my screen. And so here's his website. You can learn more about him and book a session. So welcome, Sean, to the show. Are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear. And let me... All right. So also, audience members, if you have any questions in the chat for our guests or for me, you're welcome to go ahead and put them in there, and I'll get to them as when we can. So go ahead, Sean. Maybe introduce yourself. Anything else you want to add to that bio?
Oh yeah. This is Lotus. Anyway, yeah. That's it.
Psychic
No.
energy healer cat.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. I teach her as much as she can. She's a really good healer. Yeah. Yay. So I like going into the concepts of different realities and dreams that we exist in, and branching out as much as I can and what I exist as, and seeing and feeling into what the DNA technology is, and lots of things that have led me down a path of stuff that barely anyone goes into in this reality, and it's a shame, but well, in the future, and that'll be exciting as our species becomes more psionically emerging and understands this nature of reality and the DNA and all the other aspects, to where they complete that as a functional, maintaining aspect of reality that gets better and better and better.
So tell us a little bit about your services. I know you've actually been quite instrumental in helping a lot of other experiencers. There's not too many people out there in the circuit nowadays that can help people that have been through the SSP actually recover some of their memories. So give us a little information about what you do.
Thank you. I've had a lot of interesting positive and negative experience that have happened to me in many spectrums that made me question reality, and they pushed me to having to learn how to resolve, cope, or completely shift it to what I prefer, and then have the evidence to back that up and have it to where I reverse engineer the method and how to do it and form it as a whole ability. And I like tapping into the blueprints of different abilities and what it takes to create that and what it has existed as previously, and gain past life memory, gain awareness of different types of memory, of packets of experience in how they introduce to you on this timeline through DNA, past lives, dilation of going other places based on what is allowed to interact with you on the timeline, similar to like what I was talking with you previously, where if a bunch of different beings gained all these abilities and have been playing chess moves throughout the universe in different multidimensional spectrums where they don't have to interfere and they don't have to be observed, and they can watch and influence in the founding of this dream and Earth and the multi-layered bubbles of reality and all the dreams of Earth and the solar system, the galaxy, and the universe, and what they're all holding together to what this is, and what manifests, and the chess game that leads up to this manifestation here, of all these other chess games in the background that can be observed in kind of like this quantum bubble of now moment that branches off what is everything, and the belief and what our ancestors are agreeing to in belief, as well as observation of the quanta and the observer effect and our ability to change things, and the way the brain translates stuff and what we're programmed to sync up with in our multiplayer hologram, and the different rules of that, and what we're allowed to go into and build off of as an evolving species that's interacting with many other species that have their bubble of reality rules, and how they all mesh together, and what we are, and as humans, and what is human, is like Hu is like an ancient word for God, and man is that. So it's like thing. What does that mean? And then also like what is our DNA and evidence and what we have, and all these amazing library of all these species all together as one, and that like super technology of like a combination of everything, or at most things. It's kind of fun, and it's never-ending awesomeness of gifts.
Can you describe what you see when, like, because you say here you work with DNA, you can access DNA records. So are you able to see people's etheric DNA, and what does it look like wherever this realm that you're looking at, or maybe within the same individual?
That's a good question. My perception ability is combining clairaudience, voyance, heart knowing, translation, empathic, biophoton emission scanning ability that I train very well to translate and bring up to perception operating systems and dashboards that I daydream, that changes. Like there's like the aspect of like, oh, you're controlling the daydream or the letting it flow, and the letting it flow one has data that already exists that you're accessing. And there's some like things people have to like heal up and clear out before it gets to where it's really accurate. And each of these are a sense ability that can be trained in different things people have made, but a lot of the stuff is like one big screen and a bunch of little screens all around it, and also like any like shifting buttons and things that initiate stuff that I can bring in out of my focus, and increase in the density of light. That's kind of like, oh, I can perceive a dream while perceiving this, and it's like, oh, it's functioning as a control room that observes stuff and diagnose it. If I get a person's approval to scan the mission of a biophoton, as an example, which has the blueprint of everything that they've ever been through that's recorded in their body, and a blueprint of their DNA and other stuff. So you can open that up as a light body reading supercomputer that the body's meant to function as, if everything's in the energetic plumbing, electricity, all the stuff in the hormones and all the technology is functioning well enough to be able to perceive more and more and more. And everyone has the ability to do this because it's essentially what becoming psionic or psychic is, which everyone has the right or potential to, especially when they are unified with everything in consciousness, more and more and more. And the reason for being here in this dream, which when you experience different dream bubbles that are different than this, besides like what we think is dreams or astral or bilocation or actually going somewhere physically, or all this kind of stuff that are chess moves that a person can do and how it perceives, which can be confusing, except when you read the body and the timeline of how everything has come into being, and for that person's hologram of light as a supercomputer moment to moment. And yeah, there's...
All right. Well, my next question to you is, what do biophotons look like to you? So you mentioned like these screens.
Yeah.
So is like a computer in your mind?
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, and you making the switches and knobs, you forming it together, you training it, you practicing with it, you daydreaming it into existence. The supercomputer is very reactive and can be very up to like, oh, this works for you? Okay. You know, your species knows about phones. Oh, we can make something like that. And then it kind of like work. And like people have made, I've seen, observed like through multiple lives, like what people form that like gets them to where it becomes real. Interesting. Can you ask that question one more time?
Yeah, well, the question is biophotons. I mean, you described this screen-like appearance. I'm assuming those are what the biophotons, you would see the biophotons within the screen, or is the screen itself also biophotons?
That's a good point. Light technology is very interesting, and each time you observe it, it has more and more layers of what can be held within it. And it's like the same amount of data can be split infinitely in a hologram and light as it projects. And that this science evidence also has gone into like, oh, there's a theory that all lights and all matter is quantum entangled with each other, because it all goes back to like oneness and has split and all those things, and like channels and bandwidths of its new expression and creation, and the previous layer of interconnectivity and reactivity. Yeah, the biophotons are like omnidirectionally emitting off a person's body in every direction, that kind of have a light stream of traveling through a medium, and that syncs up with like an electromagnetic field that is interacting with as a torus from the heart, and like a pulsing heart field, Stanford, all that, and syncs up at the ends in like little magnetized wormholes that are programmable, that we also have in the DNA, which it's like little black holes, but not really, but only because our physics is observing what that is by a thing that's able to capture light, and also portal light somewhere else, quantum tunneling, and that affect DNA from one part of the room affecting another piece of DNA from another part of the room, and also them being able to trade energy and information, and it being like an interesting system of stars throughout the body, of data that like fractals up and down infinitely.
So that's how you can upgrade other people's DNA, I'm assuming, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, light is, yeah, exactly. Light can change DNA for sure.
Would you consider that the same thing as etheric DNA, what you're doing?
Yeah, that was the other layers. That was good. There's so much into this. Yeah, so like the DNA, besides what we see physically, has many different spectrums around it, and layers that can be seen and perceived in meaning, and like energetic extensions, like what you're talking about in etheric, astral, dream, and other types of layers over top of each other. And the energy emission the DNA creates is kind of like an extension of the micro spectrums of what create a body of energy, which then can be seen as the astral body or the dream body or the other stuff when it fractals up. And then the powerhouses in the spectrums of the DNA, the cells, the mitochondria, the organs, and what makes up that. And then the operating systems to observance of it, which people have made different things and ways to view it, layers, strands, like interacting with a form of observing inputs of evolution, as well as imprints from genetic lineages or other species into us and what they've formed in technology, and that being connected and having all the plumbing synced up to it and being able to observe where it's supposed to be at in like a blueprint and what it's at, and like the different spectrums of color and information translation that come to you in each layer as it trains with an individual's ability to program that or help program another, or if a bigger chess move for a whole lineage or something.
All right, let's move on here. So next question is how many strands of DNA are there? If you can see DNA, like how many do you typically see?
That's a good question. I hear a lot of what people are saying, and I mostly get that they're right to a point where it's like we have infinite, limitless psionic potential as well as DNA technology potential, and we have like interaction on this planet with things that go back and forward in time and can add genetic introductions. So the number will keep growing. And if you find a bunch of people agreeing to a certain number of what we're allowed to, that usually means it's showing up as a packet of information that's being permeated in a shared bubble of reality. Because once somebody gets a certain DNA strand activation line, they start producing stuff in their hologram that is meeting that existing reality. And as they share that with other people, it upgrades them and allows them new horizons. So I will not put a cap or a limit on the number, but like there's levels that most people are allowed to access or what they should focus on at the moment.
And what do you think most people have DNA wise, etherically, I guess?
Yeah, like I'd agree with the interaction system of observation for like, oh, how often or how common is it for a person mundane as well as somebody that's very active having different levels. But like the amount of people on this planet, they're usually in their lifetime, they don't get past 3, which makes like sense with like a synchronistic thing of how much they're able to process. But as like timelines shift, more and more people have the ability to bypass that blockage as it like, especially when they're growth oriented. If they're like they're becoming their best version of themselves, they're becoming their true self, they're becoming their pure self, they are becoming into that unfoldment of their lucid dream and evolution at a greater pace, which will coincide with interesting events that they witness and view in their reality. Which is
All right. Well, my next question is I know you mentioned these screens that you see in your mind, like these computer screens. Do you see it all the time with everything that you interact with, even like stones, rocks? I'm assuming not just people, maybe animals.
Yeah, it's like an intensity of energy that's like I can turn up and down as I kind of like shift something in and out of my focus. And sometimes my focus is like I don't need to view all this stuff. I go within and I need to like or like a big detachment thing. It depends on what mode I'm on. And if I'm looking at an observation of the planet or something I'm interacting with in drama, because there's a lot of information coming at all of us at once, and usually people are too overloaded to be able to understand or translate anything, and it usually comes up on all these different lines of intuition and like, oh, that's weird, that's in my mind. And it's like all these kind of things that like come in, and if you can train the awareness and the translation to where it flows in more easily automatically in a state, it's something that gets faster and faster and stronger, and can build upon and have multiple observation things functioning at once, and it be like natural kind of like being like every one of these things, and it's like a sense that unfolds into knowingness quicker and quicker, and also like daydreamed all at once, kind of that can get HD and bright or less.
So what is the difference between psionic and psychic? And what is it that exactly you do?
Yeah, that's this one. Almost nothing. I don't like using psychic as a word because too many people get triggered by it because they think of like people, not that there's anything wrong with it or anything. People that there's a lot of propaganda online for psychic people that make it, because we're living in a reality that wants to shut down our ability to do stuff advancedly. It wants to keep us in a certain level of advancement that's controllable, and if anything challenges that in power differential, that's squashed immediately. And it's like, no, you can't do that. Agree to my limiting reality. And they tell you what exists and what's true. What is limited to them is true. So they will never look for a reason to question that, or lucidity, or even though it's completely possible to do all these things, has been proven over and over again. There's many different examples, and I got playlists of just endless stuff. Go ahead and just prove it all. All you need is one, and it even allows the greater potential of even more things to unfold. If you're wanting to be somebody that believes this stuff doesn't exist without a passion, I mean, with the passions, or somehow be very passionate about nescience, the opposite of science, of not to know something, that it's like hijacked skepticism that's corporately driven most of the time, or like programmed to bully mentality people down. It's kind of like holding back people that want to be change the world, like Nikola Tesla. Why don't you just let the guy figure out shit that might end up making the reality a better place and challenge things? If you automatically believe you know everything and you're the arbiter of truth, honestly, I've never met a person that's doing that that's 100% true. So dogmas exist in everyone, even me. And I'm constantly trying to get to a greater centering of truth, because it's like an infinite journey in what it takes to be true, because it's not simple, but at the same time is everything, because everything is true, not in the sense that everything in like dogmas and all that, but there's like reasons for everything and why people believe stuff, and the bubbles of reality that people go under, and what it takes to make the perfect timeline, because a group of people that somehow believe something that would otherwise be violent, that somehow makes the timeline better, and it gives them a chance to get to a point where they don't have to need that anymore, and then they can rise above it. But still, it made them morally good for a certain amount of time while they were violent. So there's many different reasons for things, and as we look for why there's a current state of reality where we're existing in like, oh, maybe this exists, maybe it doesn't exist, or at least it's hard to manifest here. Let's figure out why. Why is this dismissive? Why is this made a joke? And I mean, it's funny that people prank this stuff, but like deceiving isn't fun. Magic is wonderful, card tricks and all that stuff. But magic with a K and psionics, and which is been described is a military science. It's, if you think this isn't real, oh wow, okay, don't, yeah, do some research. It exists. I mean, it's covered up by a lot of stuff that also wants to make it the only focus, such as comics and other stuff. So it's like, oh, this must come from comics because it takes up the first 10 pages of Google. Okay. There's reasons why this is all suppressed. If you challenge things that want to limit your reality bubble, you will find many truths and many gold that leads you to greater perspectives. If you can anchor in truth, love skepticism, because it balances you from having a very unbalanced reality bubble that can lead you astray and get you believing things that somehow you're not able to actually do what it takes to become true, or not willing to, or there's like a bunch of ignoring factors or all this kind of stuff that people have. And balance that. That is a great basis. I started skeptical and I got into all this, like had some experiences that got me like, oh, I better question this. I started seeing things and things appearing to me, and it was getting more and more frequent, and I was like, oh shit, I can't ignore this. This is real. And then,
Well, why don't you talk a little bit about that? How did you actually get these abilities, and have you always had them?
kind of in a weird temporal way I have, but like and also before lives, and so it's mostly relearning it. But yeah, grew up kind of interesting, and then but a lot of it being suppressed, and then having interesting experiences, and then not being able to talk about it with anyone, and then getting out of school, and then having the freedom to take off with this stuff. But like even before getting out of school, things happening that I was like, holy shit, what the fuck just happened? And then have to like go back to school and like, oh, I can't really tell anyone about this. And then I also noticed there's like things that appear in the mental schism of things that like, oh yeah, forget about that, that didn't happen. And then it's like, oh shit, I need to remember this. It's like this isn't normal. And then it's like things like that form in the mind. It's like, oh yeah, that was fake. It was a dream.
You've had these abilities since you were a child, as far as back as you can remember.
Yes, and then contracts to like unfold it very rapidly, and like ups and downs, positive, negative, positive experiences, like amazing dreams that I was like off somewhere for like years, and then come back, and then visitations, meeting different types of beings, gaining a lot of wisdom, going to like schools of different types, training, a lot of ability training, stuff where I would go back in time. There's a lot, and I'm still unfolding into it.
Why don't you talk about that? I mean, you
Sure.
say you were who was training you? I'm assuming this is the SSP groups.
That's one of them, but I mostly learned all my abilities before that. A lot of the stuff I interacted with was factions that had time travel technology that were looking for people with certain abilities that had the authority to do them, especially like the big advanced ones that like affect like a lot of things. That Earth kind of like works like this thing that like gets better and better and better at resolving people that fuck up the timeline with abilities, and like, oh no, you don't get that authority, that could start lessening and like earning it back and like maintaining it and doing what it takes to protect it. And as you're doing that more, you advance faster and faster, faster, and it comes in a thing that then also affects all these different moments back in time of what you're allowed to become aware of, and it kind of unfolds fully more like you just impact years worth of data and information. So a lot of this is like kept in a bubble of reality that's made so it doesn't interfere with the stream as much as possible, so that there's a certain level of what you're trying to create maintained, and also not affecting the timeline out of its perfect equation for the goals of resolving this species, of what it's dealing with and who it is and what it's going to become and all the DNA involved. It takes a lot of observance to keep this game together, of awareness and how things function, and like, because there's a free will chess game involved, and there are some really powerful positive, really powerful negative beings here, and they're always challenging things, and it's taking it to the next level, which is part of the evolution of a planet and all this universe where they're culminating in one game, all these multiversal beings and souls that are like ancient.
Well, Sean, can you name some of the factions that have this time travel tech that you might have worked with?
I mean, we know about the Time Core. We know about like beings that are the concept brought into the Adjustment Bureau concept. There's things soft disclosed in like Doctor Who for concepts, but like that can be like on a large or much larger scale. It's like it doesn't have to be humanoid, and like ancient beings that are all like what formed here in DNA. Every species can have a time aware being or soul incarnate into it, and then that bring a whole new change to that species timeline. And the factions and breakaway civilizations and all kinds of interesting mystery schools that have formed throughout time. Of our species, other species, inner Earth species, intersolar collectives, galactic, universal, multiversal, beyond, and like the immigrations here in this bubble of reality, because a lot of beings of that nature are also involved in resolving big things. And some can bilocate and do some very incredible things and have advanced technologies and ships and are their own ship and all this stuff. And they do things to make it the best possible thing, chocolate souffle, whatever way of like how to have all the purposes met, all the bubbles of reality be able to like go off and experience multiple timelines at once, and they all come to an interesting unity equation that allows for all types of forms of them succeeding in their mission, them also having the failed experiences, that see what needs to happen to make all these other things happen in the future, and an observance of all that trained as a momentary being.
Yeah. Okay, well, Sean, so you said you were a part of the Time Corp. Is that correct? Or the Time Core, I meant to say. Are you allowed to talk about it?
Very cautiously. Time Core is used by some of the factions, but a lot of them have entire different names to it.
Can you tell us those names? So
They all
these
change
groups
over
don't
time,
exist
right?
yet, right? I mean, not in this timeline. This is all in the future.
A lot of the like a lot, yeah. The SSP programs of the future are way more active than the moment ones and the ones from the past. So they'll be interacting with more people that you will talk to. Otherwise, most people I view will be interacting with their soul family in visitations at least once, or at least a few times, because like they don't have to do anything that interferes with this dream, and they can visit you in some way, energy, or if they really need you physically. That's an interesting concept, and it does happen. But some people also get abducted. But
Well, what about
yeah,
what is the time core? How about start with that?
It's the humans' version of them gaining time travel technology and maintaining it. It's supposed to be what is given to the other factions of the SSP as like, oh, this is their department, their job to what makes things happen in that spectrum. And they're a very advanced compartmentalized group that realizes what they have in technology, and part of them maintaining it is protecting the shit out of it. And they will shift and morph to different experiences back and forth in time under different names. And also there's multiple factions that are growing that same ability to make that concept. So there's not just one at all. And many other species have a version of it that are positive, negative, neutral, though the negative are usually stealing their authority to do it. And that's being challenged all the time because it's like something that's has a resolution forward in time, although there's new unpredictable chess moves that get created when though we learn from all these things that happen in the timeline that and then make it like, oh, now we have a counter to that. So it's like, yay, the more things that challenge time and like what they can do with it, the better and more resilient this planet gets at it in all its collectives. And one can find evidence in that.
Yeah. Can you comment about what year the time core goes into business? I kind of want to get an idea like where you're stationed and how you're moving back and forth too.
That's a very interesting question. I actually asked that question multiple times and got a expanded upon answer each time. So I feel like when I ask that again, because I have the ability to ask it instantly and like get the information. There's certain things that they're trying to keep private about its origin because it's a time traveling anchor in existence that can be messed with in incursion to where something wants to uncreate it from existing, and it has redundancy factors that try to keep it from being uncreated or timeline genocided or all these different things, because the negative factions of time travel have this battle thing that's going off in like what manifests, and it's like a chess move to where they try to uncreate a bunch of things, and if they're able to, they can uncreate entire like species or a lineage or like an entire like person and reality and dream, and even universes have been uncreated. And it's like why this ability is very sought after, why it's so dangerous. And there's a layering of what created the time core? What was the time travel beings before them, as it like is a cake that becomes it. If you wanted to look at the points in the timeline when a certain amount of advancement in the members, and what am I allowed to say? Because I need to I actually ask that with this one. A lot of the ones that are known started also with the regular secret space program concepts when they got the technology from spaceships and Vimana that they're reverse engineering. And then they also traded the technology. So those factions of what we know as the Time Core, there have been ancienter things on this planet, even ones with humans that have also formed in the timeline. Am I allowed to say about that? Like something around Roman time, as an example. And I'll be a little vague on that, but like Vimana technology, there's like ships that have very advanced technology that are out of phase in like mountains and like deserts and all kinds of interesting areas that are some in different varying levels of functionality depending on why they're parked there and abandoned or kept there in an actual strategic moment in time to interact with someone in the future that's the right person that will then bring them back into interaction in this dream as like a interesting way of how to bend rules with what can manifest in this reality, with how time travel is played, and all those chess moves of like, this aircraft's going down. Oh no, this isn't predicted.
So Sean, let's talk about one of these timelines that have been genocide. For example, there's a reality where the Roman Empire never fell. Why don't you describe a little bit about that? Do you have any information about some of these timelines, like that one in particular, what it's like there now?
That's a cool question. I like that. Yeah, there's all these branching time in a time stream, kind of like this tree, that lead into all these different timeline potentials based on the lessons and the wanting to experience all and the ability for the higher dimensional aspects of one's consciousness and what they're able to observe and create and see from all their timeline potentials and choice points, what the earth is creating, what source and the solar, all that is also creating in their multiplayer hologram, and they observe for different functions. They create things. Sometimes originally they already had them before. Sometimes shows will trigger a bunch of beings to create a bunch of new timelines. It's interesting. But usually Earth will have like a lot of timeline awareness, so she'll come up with a lot of things first. But
what about that specific timeline? Do you have any information?
Yeah, so like Rome, where have you heard of this? This is fun.
Was it you? Or maybe it was Peter.
Okay. Do you remember what he described in it? Because like there's so Rome, when one that they didn't fall, there's a bunch of different timelines to this based on all the different chess players that were observing it. Earth, source, some type of thing that I can't talk about. Some other observers, and them wanting to experience that for a reason. So like Rome, the beings that are invested in what Rome is, what it created, what it was involved in, the gods that in their chess moving in that in their different form, and the Vatican and multidimensional time travel and the religious systems and mystery schools. And so they're creating and are on a chess game that they really want. So they're allowed to experience that, and that's branching off from us so that they can have that experience, but like it doesn't lead to things that are within the greater free will choice of all the collectives in their greatest evolution. So a lot of these destruction timelines will branch off, like a zombie apocalypses and nuclear fallouts and all these things. Things go back in time and change it. So a lot of things protecting the planet.
Well, how about you describe a timeline that's been genocide already? Something that you're more aware of.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of zombie ones, like neutron bombs, proteinaceous infectious ions, the, the the inverted protein that flips, that like turns a person into like mad cow disease, and other forms of that, but like that's been mostly quarantined to local bubbles of reality in this dream, for a lot of good reasons, and it's like it's not easy to have that just like take off, unless like other reality bubble rule ones that are like, oh, because like there's a culture for this, so like people are like watching these shows, and as a collective they're influencing what becomes real, and that like creates all these different timelines of perception. Like, oh, the zombies are made by a fungus, the virus, they can run faster, and then so like some of these are used negatively to also control us, but like some are like a chess game for a reason and are fun like training courses, or they will emotionally traumatize a person. It depends on like the multi-dimensional chess move that's going on in a person's reality. They're allowing all this, if they're getting it in order, if something's creating for them. And then nuclear fallout, there's a bunch of those. They spawn up every time there's like there's a potential of a higher threat for nuclear interaction and like ego chess butting of like war criminals. Yeah, they literally form after that, and then there's like evidence to like, oh, what would you be doing? Oh, you travel like south to where your parents are, or like you try to meet up with the and like who survives, and like the people that you look at the timelines as a training course, and you see what you're allowed to play in, and use that as a authority builder, because you're training abilities for timeline incursion prevention and other systems of interaction. Like, oh, how many timelines where there's a zombie apocalypse, as an example, do you how many you're alive on and how many you're dead on? And they're like, oh, do I actually have to die? No, but you have to make it so that version of you was influenced not to turn left instead of right, or not go down that alleyway, or weren't in this area at this time, or is like, and then like training remote influencing.
So is that like when happens when your car breaks down at a really inoperable time? It's because maybe a parallel version of yourself is trying to prevent something catastrophic from happening.
Hugely good intuition with that. Yeah, that's exactly the thing to like positively look at all why like all these things happen to us that seem like mistakes, or like, oh, that sucked. It could be the trip that prevents your car accident an hour later. So it's all these things that go back in time that like, oh, why did I have that kind of near-death experience? Oh, but I also didn't die. Well, every near-death experience changes your timeline dramatically, and it gives you a whole bunch of information, life review, a bunch of beings visit you all in like one moment, and like some will even protect you and like change the timeline. I've seen and heard and been part of accidental experiences and near-death experiences where the whole thing shifts and you come to safety. Like people end up in accidents that would kill and crush everything else in all the other seats of the car except the one they're in. No one else is there. Or like they would wake up like a large distance away from their car, like totally unharmed without a scratch, and it'd be like weird. But
so you've mentioned the term Schrodinger's cat. Did I say that right?
it's whatever. I think it's funny. Like scrote. Schrodinger's cat.
Yes,
But
that's where
it's
somebody's
true.
both alive and dead at the same time.
Exactly.
And that's from all these parallel realities. So is it possible to do parallel reality jumping?
Absolutely.
Have
Quantum
you done it?
jumping, love it. Great
Have you done it?
ability. Yeah, all the time. I love doing it. I do it every day, and it's like this. I'm like forming all these different abilities that like have existed for that, and like building upon it to try to make the best possible quantum jumping tech that you can do in a timeline shift. Is like meeting what it needs. There's also like timeline merging, timeline switch, school of reversal. There's like all these different 0 point timeline clearing, all kinds of cool abilities that can be learned from this.
And so that would also play into the Mandela effect.
Absolutely. Yeah. We recently did a conference in Idaho, Mandela Effect conference. That was fun. That goes fully into quantum jumping and all this kind of ability to become more lucid in the dream and shift it, and the evidence of when the reality shifted, and like the merging and all the different stuff between when people in different reality bubbles come together, as it's kind of like a garden that we and Earth creates of timelines and cultivate for different reasons as an ability.
So I see yourself lighting up quite a bit when we talk about time travel. Does that also mean that you're a child of Montauk?
I'm getting, I shouldn't talk about my interaction with that. Not I. If a child of Montauk, like, how would you define that?
You participated in those projects, the really bad ones, or maybe there's some good ones where they actually you stop it, because there are some timelines in the future when our future self, I know me in particular, is recruited into the SSP and we're sent back in time to stop Montauk or what was going on there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I see a lot of people that I will not like. It's a certain amount of people with Montauk specifically, but like other projects like Montauk, mind control, training, recruiting, soldiers, psionic, doctors, ship engineers, more fingers than I have in skills and brain drain for projects, and some an abusive dark spectrum neutral light, and like forming and changing over time based on the chess moves of each individual involved, as it interestingly chess moves itself in a way where it's not completely directly entangled in this time bubble that we perceive, so that it's more influenced to change. Not everything is set in stone with Montauk as well as all these projects. And as they stay in that spectrum of unseen, that gives it a lot of ability to change over time through the chess moves of beings of observing it, with their ability to change what they observe and what collapses in the wave field function when evidence appears as it enters the bubble of reality, and what it is before that, and as it interacts with them in frequency, in energy, in wounds, in trauma, in psyche, in memories, in visions, in dreams, in ways that affect a person, and how much it's anchored in, how much it's like the person's higher self wants it to stay on their timeline for a purpose, like they're changing it from the inside, or whatever like teaching it brings that is important and layers to it, that it isn't seen as something that is an incursion. I've had lots of incursions. I've had many different projects try to abduct me, and then I go like it was never something that was like strong in my timeline. It was like it had a frequency that was perpetuating as a wound that was being brought up to where it would remain anchored into me, controlling me, interacting with me, influencing me, try to project thoughts and like all this other stuff in evidence until I decided to uncreate it. And a lot of the negative projects I uncreated because I don't need to be involved in them. The ones that I am involved in, I usually have a purpose to, and I'm able to make it so it's not negative with enough energy and influence, looking back at the timeline as a separate bubble of reality than what is seen and like anchored in multiple ways, as if you were to see it becoming like a Schrodinger's cat concept as you detach or entangle with it more, and what people choose with these scenarios. Because if it's a negative program and you don't want to be involved in it, you have all the right to uncreate it from interacting with you. It just, if you're able to actually do that and putting enough force to where you're able to like make it so that they don't know about you, you're able to camouflage yourself enough, you're able to go back in time and influence these people like, oh yeah, she's not important, or all this other stuff. Then the motivations and what anchors it as like a force to create in the person's hologram and what is perceived and seen by the senses, etc. I do have ones that I do that with, and I'm constantly questioning if they're real because I want truth more than anything. So I'm willing to be like, oh, maybe they're not real, but at the same time, evidence keeps showing up, and I keep like looking at that pile of evidence that I accumulated through the time, and I'm like, oh wait, I gotta have to remember that. But so like I don't really mind if people don't believe it. I don't even need to come out about this stuff. It's not even really it doesn't help me or anyone.
Okay, but well, let's get back on topic here. Peter, the insider, has talked about us residing in a bubble pocket reality, and because the main timeline that we were on was destroyed. Do you happen to have any information about our original organic timeline, and where are we headed now?
What time stamp dates was he talking about, like for our original timeline destroyed? Is it you talking about like Atlantis or like recent events?
Recent events, in particular, having to do with Monarch. They attempted to destroy our timeline because they're basically losing control.
So like the factions that made the Monarch mind control projects?
Yeah, Monarch's Solutions Unlimited. They have a base underground dome underneath Toronto. The base itself is roughly 50 miles wide.
That's an interesting one. That's a cool observation.
Are you able to remote view that?
Yeah. I'll read into the data. It's a little complicated.
It's right on the border between U.S. and Canada, and it's ancient. It's been there for over 10,000 years.
And are they? So I'm going to ask you, because you publicly know about this. Do they have advanced systems of AI where they're trying to gain a control factor for things back and forward in time and syncing up with like their handlers in like compartmentalized like groups that control up a branch that is constantly trying to outcreate things in control in and energy harvesting?
Well, I mean, a lot of the beings there are infested with the Archons. Apparently, the whole organization is run by Paul Serene. He is his clone is Kevin Spacey. He made a clone and put him in public, but so that's the way he can go out in the public and be a public figure. Of course, I don't think anybody want to be associated with Kevin Spacey anymore, but Yeah, I mean they do a lot of trauma and torture, and they're being slowly dismantled from other SSP groups, I assume.
Okay, so cool. So like going back to the original timeline and replace, did he like explain like into like is it still that way in his perception, or is that like a little bit of a while ago information? Because like it's something that's oh, there's a faction that's trying to control things in a negative non-free will way. They didn't earn that authority. Any time ability they have, they didn't earn. It's all temporary. And anything they interact with in CERN or CERN-like technology or AI or time control technology, influence of the hologram, things going into the matrix, concepts in layers of input of the hologram at advanced level, and virus of hijacking systems of layers of holograms. That's always in a flux. So that's I'm getting that was a threat at one point, is not currently, is like a wound still, because they're still a faction that's attempting to constantly do that. Though it's like being limited quite a bit, and has a chess move for manifestation with why it's allowed to a certain point with each influx of their technology. Because the Earth like learned some stuff, like reasons CERN is allowed to like progress as it is to Earth's perspective is mainly because it's not her biggest concern. Her biggest concern is the negative predators on this planet that are like big multidimensional predators that she has, like besides like the positive interactions with what Earth is and where she's a school and all that. She's also a quarantine zone in multiple realms for very big apex predators, as like that whole prison planet concept, where things really don't want to be here anymore because they are being resolved and healed and brought to a point of changing what they're mind controlled to be, which is in separation consciousness. And when they attest the barriers of this reality and wanting to leave when they're not supposed to, that really quite instantly affects the rest of the multiverse. And then they are ensuing in a counter chess move. So to keep her shadow from affecting too much of the external universe as much as she can, with like as she rises back into her power, and that will be replaced or transmuted into a new expression, because that's what she's doing with CERN as like this attack dog. She lets off the chain sometimes and then gets shut down when negative beings that don't want to be here attempt to leave. And because there's a lot of powerful multidimensional beings that can instantly just shut down CERN. And the reason they're not allowed to is because there are things that like, oh, see it as like an electric fence and like a blockage, which ultimately is abusing its system as a reality control device and is limiting our evolution. So needs a resolution as a bleeding wound in reality, but
Okay,
it's
Sean.
not the core of everything.
Yeah. All right. Let's put a pause on that. Do you happen to have any information about who is in charge of creating these time bubbles, these pocket realities? Is that the Time Core?
Which bubbles of reality are you talking about? Are you talking about like this timeline, this what we're observing?
Well, yeah, maybe the one that we're in, or just in general. So who's in charge of it all?
That's a good point. So like multiple layers going back in even beyond space and time into the absolute of like beyond what we can perceive, of creating a dream hologram existing structure of observable experience and light, universally going back, that like then creates other things within it, and them getting their own free will to grow and create a bubble of reality within that, and then that creating within it and them growing, and it's just going infinitely in and out, like whole collectives within of types of prime creators within a bubble of reality, universe, collective, multiverses, the galaxy going down, solar, the beings that created the solar system brought all the planets in what they existed as in drama together, in contracts of creation, and who they are in spirit and what they've existed as in entanglement with everyone that shows up here and why they're showing up here, and all the different beings that are forming. Oh, you're the good guys, you're the bad guys, you're the all the things in between. You all, some of you have your own agendas, all the things that make the game go together in a unique experience that's worth keeping and going strong and building resilience. There's different programmers that are set aside for that, different spectrums of how that's been observed in what exists in our culture, such as divinity path beings, founders, deities, beings of high authority, time protectors, beings, dragons, elementals, angels, elemental programmer, reality programmers, dream weavers, deities from like India. There's like a lot of the beings of authority that are in that spectrum also branch themselves off into many versions of themselves and even show up here sometimes.
Yeah, so we're getting the point here, Sean. So pretty much nobody controls it all, or everything controls it all. Maybe your own, each one of us individually, just by changing our thoughts.
You are everything. You are the source of everything.
Okay, great. So what do you, and this may actually, I'm really worried about asking you this question because you may actually answer it, but what do you see in the future happening just to humanity in general, maybe over the next 10 years or so? Does the government ever come out with the ETs and tell people, oh, by the way, they're real, we've been lying to you? Do they ever come clean?
The future is always changing. It's never set in stone. There are some things that are set in stone based on habit patterns and how much like multitude of the collective wants it to become that, and the various purposes. Though there's a lot of free flow, and so that goes into all the different potentials of being that we shift into, with every chess mover in the game having an influence on what that becomes, and the grand equation involved, in all the free will involved, and the mind control, and the things that are converging, and the motivations to create this and that and that. Because a lot of beings, once they observe what can exist in time or have an imagination on what they create, they want that to become so. And so that becomes like a vote of the whole collective and where it branches off into. And even some of those beings which go into that parallel Earth concept with the branching timelines, where some beings will experience certain things. And that's like true with especially their I am, their greatest amount of presence and authority and sovereignty of awareness in specific points of timelines that they are agreeing to, or having their energy harvested to agree to something, and then their ability to shift at any moment to an orientation of moment to moment and moment that get them to a different one that they're able to perceive as they spark creativity and imagination and the best possible timeline and what can be.
Okay. Well, let me rephrase the question, because typically, at least with a lot of the ETs, when they look into the future, and we may be even referring to looking glass technology, there are assigned probabilities of certain events. So what do you have any information about any probable, something that may be probable in our future that's coming up that you could share with us?
So there's a lot of interesting probability streams that are the strongest, especially, and you can like make safe bets, and make a very advanced predictive model that like sharpens the Oracle skill set for precognitive ability. And you can see the motivation factors of a group that have the strongest, like on a bar graph of influence of what they want to create, and then see what that is in spectrum. And the biggest ones are like resolution for well, like karma for every person that's incarnating. So like people will continue to be challenged to where they learn lessons. And if they're not learning lessons, then it will take them into a dramatic timeline. And if they are learning lessons, they will orient towards their greatest timeline, no matter what's going on with the whole collective. The whole collective of what shows up like politically and what we see, it will stay maintained in a way that's less dramatic, and maintains our ability to eventually come to a point where we all choose to free ourselves. That is constantly being delayed at all points because it can be made with unpredictable chess moves. And the more that happens in beings doing things that change the world in unpredictable ways, the more we will bring certain event horizon points closer and closer into being. And that can be perceived as a constant, like, oh, okay, I did this chess move to change this. Let me check how much it actually changed, and like what it's anchored into in the collective. Because there's like a bunch of different reality bubbles and dreams and timelines that are created that are like the warm-up chess game for the end chess game that all beings are agreeing to, like, okay, that's what is manifest, fully anchored, real. And so the amount of game moves that go into that is pretty interesting. So I usually look at it in time windows of an opportunity, and especially when you have the ability to tell a lot of people at once, that will change everything. If you were to view the event having to do with disclosure and things having to do with ETs and all that, that's constantly changing. There's things challenging that all the time. Because they're stubborn and they want things, and they're stealing a bunch of authority to do it, and they're willing to give up a lot of reserves to keep it going, especially all these different things that want to keep us as like an energy harvesting, but it's slipping more out of their fingers. And as they use up more of their energy, they have less ability to spend that energy on everything, so they have to give up certain things that they'll have their last chess move, like concepts that they'll hold on to that will be harder to bring into the full moment now right away. And you can see that where that is and what it takes to bring that into being. And if it's enough will and the types of people that incarnate here that to be unpredictable, to come out with this whole new product or thing or invention, or that like completely challenges that, that will be more and more.
Okay. All right.
The thing window, I am seeing it getting harder.
Okay. How about this? This is somebody submitted this from the audience. What is the probability of our ascension in the next 5 years? How would you address that?
Interesting question. Ascension is many different spectrums of awareness in growth, the great work, and like coming more of our anchored being, in light and awareness of our divinity self and other concepts, into becoming more and more of our true self. And that's an individual path on many different spectrums. The thing of it becoming an event that is certain things that happen to the planet in her growth. We on an individual basis are ascending on our own path that is can be completely on its own. So you being able, each individual working on themselves to where they have their ascension is the thing in where they're developing the energy skill sets and the stuff that comes with it, and the earning the right, and resolving things, mostly lessons, a lot of it, because a lot of the lessons are like the blockage that holds back all the stuff you already know from just flooding in, and all these blocks and what they mean and why they're there, and the stabilization of the DNA technology, and repairing it. Because essentially we've done all these things, we've ascended multiple times before, and it's like, oh, we're coming down to a level where we're incarnating into something that's like, oh, we agreed to forget and get shut down, and all these things that we're born into, where it's like, oh yeah, this is all normal, it's just the way it is, and we become numb to it. And it's all these layers of limitations that we start releasing and challenging.
But going back to my question, do you have an idea of like a number? Are you able to ascertain that?
I see a point where there's like a wound healing of Earth's dimensional aspect of herself, to where, like, if you were to see like the fall of Atlantis and Miri and Mu and a bunch of different things, as if you were to see Earth as being of a higher dimensional quality at one point, to where she could do way more, and it was she was less wounded, and then had reality wounds that have happened to her where she had to go within and repair herself, and like things fell out of the golden age into the iron age, etc., and the separations of the stars, Sirius and rotation, equinox, all that precession, and everything that syncs up in the dance. She coming out of that, which takes a certain amount of work. The grid workers, the people that are incarnated here, everyone that's healing themselves. Every time a person heals herself, it's like a cell of her healing, and then that affecting all the cells around it, and it coming together, especially if it's strategic and locational things. She has a lot of places of power that can activate and heal things in like a up down. We help her, she helps her, and she get. Some of the places on the planet are actually in a higher frequency, and it's like locational too. But some of the bigger effects that people are looking for go back to where she's able to rise the whole thing together and kind of bring back magic, as an example, that's like permeant in the reality, as well as all these awareness and these other dimensional beings that are kind of phased out of our awareness, that come back in more and more as we have our technology sync up with the advancement of the planet itself. And that is a date that's shifting all the time too, but that mostly has to do with the reflection of the internal of the individual person. They can quantum jump to a timeline where it happens faster. So it's all, if you focus on internal growth, you'll get to a timeline where it becomes faster. But it's also an individual thing, and
So
that all works together.
The answer, it depends.
Yeah, it depends how many people are healing themselves and growing.
Okay, well, moving on to the next question. Do you think Time Corps is listening to this interview in the future? In Absolutely. Our future? Okay.
Absolutely. They monitor everything. They will tell us in interesting ways if we're talking about stuff that is dramatic.
All right. And do you think Time Corps ever sends, or even maybe not even Time Corps, maybe other groups from our future, do you think they actually send physical humans back in time to interact with the public here now?
Yeah. People have met time travelers. I've interviewed a lot of people and clients.
You've met people that are time travelers?
Yeah. For me, yeah. And especially in dilations where they visit me, but the ones that show up in my timeline where I view them in this dream, they mostly pretend they're not time travelers, and they have a weird conversation with me, or like interact in some way where they observe and I'm very sensitive. So I'll usually interview and my body records if I interacted with a time traveler. So most of the ones that are sent are in a certain level, low awareness, and also camouflaged like a lot. But some of them are aware, and those are fun, especially observing what they did on the timeline, because it might not have been, because like I had some like before I even gained the skill, but now they're kind of they can just talk to me, so like they don't have to like spy on me, and I kind of have like an interactive psionic system of learning about things that are trying to spy on me, and then figuring out what is aware of me at any given time, so that like if it's negative in intention, that I can bring its awareness to almost nothing, if it's necessary.
All right. So I guess my next question would be, when did you first realize that you had abilities that not many other people had?
Interesting. I was questioning like things I was doing at a young age, because not many people, when I brought it up to them, were like, "Oh, don't you have that happen?" And like, no. What are you talking about? And like, some would get interested, some would just like stare at me, and then some would be very uncomfortable for some reason, like they get triggered about it or something, and then change the subject, and I'd get like empathically, oh, this person's uncomfortable, and then I'm like, okay, I'll talk about something else, because I'm like also observing. It was like a sense that got better and better and better. A lot of like what makes the best timeline in decisions that I made, and like oh, I can touch the subject and I can lose I can keep going on the subject and lose a friend, or I can talk about what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And that also applies to family too. So does your family support you and your gifts and abilities?
No. My mother does. My dad doesn't know, because he doesn't even use the internet. And my sister's a skeptic, so that was fun. Training, I started scientific, so like, and then use science to learn how to become psychic, which is just, again, psionics, military science. Go to the military and say it doesn't exist. Don't tell me that. There's like a bunch of accumulation of knowledge they've formed from all these civilizations, brought into a lovely collection of knowledge in all these different countries, that use it as like form of like their form of spying and all that, you know all this stuff, but like things that they train these abilities for their usage, psionic specialists, things that have an asset to them. And they like, some people will laugh about it, but like, oh, if it might exist, that can be an asset. And it's like, oh, how much money does the military get? They can waste a lot of time and energy, and they're not wasting it on this.
So in the future, I'm assuming that's where you come from. Maybe you're on your soul level or so. Does everybody have the same kind of abilities that you have?
That's a good question. My origin is beyond time in like an absolute field, but like as I go into this linear time, I will have things. For this, I wanted to be born as a regular human, so I'll have that as an anchor in experience, but I will also go back and forth in time in many different things that come through as memory and dreams and awarenesses, and like, oh, there's like information and evidence and emotions and pain that I sometimes have to deal with. And like, oh, this pain won't go away until I resolve this thing that's like very oddly specific and having to do with a time incursion, or this other version of myself getting attacked, or like this, and then me using that as a training course, and then like, oh, I can instantly get rid of this pain by actually doing this, and the other stuff doesn't work. And even if I train all these other abilities, they don't. Some of them do, but like depends on the scenario. Some of them don't work, and it has to be very specific, or else the enormous amount of pain. Because anyone that gets tooth pain, and this is also soft disclosed in like other concepts such as like the show Legion, the new season, there's like a time traveler, and like when she goes back in time in too much, her teeth hurt like a lot. And teeth are like time sensitive crystals, and they have to do with everything that you eat, that is the matter that becomes you in your timeline progression, as well as like the most sensitive nerves in your body. And they can process a lot, and the cavities will also mean things. And like sometimes a tooth just is in pain for almost no reason, and you can resolve it, or even the physical manifestations of why it hurts will mean big things. And if you have pain in your teeth, it will usually mean a temporal incursion, and you can resolve it very successfully by resolving your timeline's wounds. And that's the evidence that one can follow up on and test.
Okay. Yeah, so we got a lot of questions from the audience members. How about could you touch on Baron Trump's the Marvelous Underground Journey, the book that was written from 1893, which alleged is connected to Donald Trump's presidency, because there's a story in there that mirrors his life. Do you have any information on that?
I heard a bit about that a while ago, and that's an interesting one. Can you refresh me on the story? There's like symbology for this coming out that like predicts like the presidency, and like things having to do with his son, and like concepts of like there's time travel programs observing this man coming in existence, and it's coming out in soft disclosure.
Mm-hmm. So it says here, Baron.
Up, you're going robot voice. The screen is so, yeah, maybe you're touching upon something. Go ahead.
Okay. But his real ventures began when Dawn, the master of all masters, inspires him to travel to Russia, where he finds there's a portal that allows him to travel to other lands. And then there's also another book. I'm assuming this is also written by the same author, called The Last President, 1896. It doesn't feature Baron Trump, but it has interesting parallels to modern times. So yeah, I'm gonna go and check that one out as well. But okay, well, how about we go? Do you have any other comments about that?
Based on my experience and clients and other people that have told me like their interaction with Trump and his family in SSP interaction, and time travel, and like the chocolate souffle of the equation of what he is doing in presidency, what he's accomplishing, what his plans were, ABC all the way down to Z, and what he's had to shift into all the different creations in time, because there's a lot of stuff trying to chess move around him and create with him. So he's got a lot of time activity in, if you were to see it like a field around him, that if something visits him a lot, or a person as an example, and they have a lot of time travel going in and out around their existence, it would have a lot more time drama if it's especially back and forth between incursions and repair. And if there's a lot of changes, if there's a lot of things trying to interact with him as like a big hairball, and that's a lot of evidence that describes there's a lot of things trying to change what he is, how he acts, and what he becomes, and how he affects all this thing as like this grand anchor for a lot of chess games being played, and that is played both by light and dark and neutral and all the different things that learn who he is, how he's operating here, what he's been hired here to do by Earth, and the functionality of, hey, what could have the timeline been if he wasn't president, and reading into those situations and why everything is the way it is and right now.
So do you think he's a time traveler?
A lot, based on my experience, more people are time travelers, and they're aware of just in what it takes to define a time traveler. Someone that consciousness time travel, you can send and view back and forward in time. You can even influence things. So that's consciousness time travel. A lot of people do that all the time. Physically time traveling, that goes into like, are you, how advanced is the technology, how much it interferes with this timeline or doesn't, to where it's barely noticeable and can exist in a spectrum of, is it a real, is it not, it doesn't really affect us, or the ones that really affect us, such as ones that he'll go into a whole meeting and he'll get thoughts. Okay.
Is that
I'll be careful with what I say. So like if he gets in a meeting or a council or some type of thing that brings wisdom to him with an influence to change the timeline, and he gets that all in his mental body in a way that doesn't quite interfere with his timeline, as an example, from a species that would be influencing him, or a faction that has less authority. And hey, now when they put him back in, he has all these things floating around his mental body that can influence his timeline, and they can observe the changes that creates, as an example. And that can be done non-physically. If they want it to really stick, they would probably do it physically, because like, again, that makes things more real.
So some people have described seeing Trump in the SSP, and in particular, Alana Kapoling has described him being debriefed about the SSP projects. And this is right before he was elected president. So do you think he's actually an officer in the SSP?
I'm not allowed to, without his permission, disclose what he's doing in chess moves, except for broad statements. Like, he's a very powerful, advanced, multidimensional being that exists in multiple places and versions himself in beings back and forth in time, his direct line of incarnations. That has engaged in time travel, as like, it has its own agenda and what it came here to do and manifest as a spirit, and its DNA lineage has also got some interesting stuff. Is he in the SSP as an officer? He has authority in this reality bubble dream. I would say he definitely has it in the unseen if he's able to manifest it here. I'm not going to go into like what he is, because that is something that is also Stringer's cat in a box, and it comes in evidence to certain people that are allowed to know about it, because he's also doing secret missions, and it's also up to change with how things change.
Well, how about you just talk about some of your SSP experiences?
Okay.
Were you in a 20-year in a back program?
So when I was reading through these traumas and these memories, a lot of things kept coming up at like age, like a lot of people I read too, age 9. But and then certain things at age 18 and introductions, and then things I'd audit to like, oh, do they need to exist, and then releasing the ones that are negative. The positive ones that remained in the human factions of SSP were mostly future time traveling factions, and they were like interacting with me mostly as like, oh, we're gonna activate this this your light body memory of this past life where you knew how to do this ability, and that then creates an altar where that in the timeline they need it, the person remembers the ability and then teaches it. And I would teach a lot of different people and then form whole new factions and skill data that they would then use to train other beings. So I would do that a lot. And then I'd also find ways to accumulate other abilities and switch them on and have them in a quarantined kind of amnesia barrier covered altar that holds all altars within that that can be switched in depending on who's visited me and if I'm in an interesting mission.
Do you know the name of this altar?
I have asked the name of some of them. Yes. None of them really matter, especially if I'm trying to keep a lot of them secret. But yeah, learning the name definitely triggers more downloading and memory. So that's a good thing for people to focus on for it too. But also there's like keywords and switches and things that you already know about. But some things your spirit is also blocking it itself. Like people, until they come out of a period of like reason behind it, like they might be in a spiritual witness protection concept or like a sleeper cell for until they come into a position where their alarm clock goes off and it like starts flowing in again. And there's also a layer of like all you can only hold back the trauma for so long. If there is I had a lot of visitation and like, oh, this like on one gosh, to say because I'm gonna talk about more of these as I come out about this, but I'm trying to build it like a cake. Like what's not because all this is like not really evident. I don't really have much evidence for this, so it doesn't really matter to most people. Stories that are interesting.
Well, were you like a super soldier? Were you put into a cyborg body or anything like that?
Okay, we should talk about this. Okay, one I'm allowed to talk about. One. Oh. Mantis. Okay. Gosh, if I come out about that, then I have to come out about that. Okay, shit. Because I'm trying to like organize it. What okay, so you already know about this, so I'm like talking to an audience that is research savvy. So like one of memories that I'm allowed to talk about now is like I'm like making sure because it's like, oh, are people ready to handle like from me talking about going to Mars or something? There's a bunch of evidence in memory that comes out about these species that are on Mars underground, and it's like that's fun because that resonates the heck out of me when I see that, and but I also have dreams that are coming to me and things that when I meditate into and I have like this heavy pressure in my heart and it's like, oh, what is that? And then like I tune into it and all these visions come up and it's just allowed to kind of flow out in like a story in a remembering chamber process dream bubble I made. So that's where the story is coming from. And if you don't believe it, that's okay. I don't really give a shit if you think it's real or not. It doesn't matter. So go ahead, and if you don't want to believe it's true, great. There's
You remember being on Mars?
Yeah, a bunch of times, and also space, like working with ships, going down into military bases, interacting in like communication ambassador things with different species. Certain ones that are well known, a lot. I try to be eclectic because I have a lot of people have a lot of DNA. There's a lot of libraries, and I'm going through them, and I'm like, oh shit, I have that DNA, and I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? And it's like there's a resolutionary process, and that is there's something negative bleeding over in drama that's adding a blockage, and then I resolve that, and I track that tension of that species, and like I'll usually like do a unity thing where I'm healing, helping to resolve like a drama with the entire species, because apparently it's easier to do these things in a highly advanced psionic level with a super hybrid humans that have been born into a thing where they are in the accumulation of all the drama of all these species all in one body, and it'd be like, oh yeah, it's just life, even though it's hard for a lot of people.
Well,
But
do you think you can describe a little bit more about maybe some of your specific experiences? For example, like what was Mars like, and how many years were you there?
So
Are these all
kind of
topics
like
you're not allowed to talk
form
about?
like information that's not well known, because like a lot of people, if I like start coming out about this, will be like, oh okay, he's saying the same thing as this and this and this. So it's like, okay, can I give you something that is like very unique? It's like, okay, let me not go with Mars, but there's like a bunch, there's like totally evidence for like the mantids and different types of insectoid species on Mars, as well as the reptoid factions, and also like this chess game Mars is doing with the different incarnations that that consciousness also incarnates into. There's like these these amazing ancient technologies on Mars. Is like a huge weapon. It's got like such an arsenal of technology within it. In like inner earth things, I would have like things that indicate memory to me that I would be sent out in a mission to, gosh, as I'm talking about this, I'm getting like, oh, only talk about a little bit. There's like stargates, there's big shielding technology, there's time travel things, there's Vimana, there's like ancient realm gate portals to the realms of Mars, similar stuff that Earth has. There's big ancient giant creatures in the oceans underground in Mars. And yeah, apparently there's oceans in Mars, and there's things that data has shown me, and I've also been able to find physically with other people talking about it, that there are these types of species here. There's a bunch of things I'd go into where when I was first awakening and my camouflage was down, I'd have all these ships. Like as soon as I go into an activation, these ships would start monitoring me and trying to influence me in the timeline, and I'd like be like, oh shit, and they would try like putting me in pain, or like my body would freeze up, or these weird things that would happen. And I would like eventually find out, oh, there's a ship, because I like get like viewing technology that pops up in my head eventually. Before I thought it was like something else, like a heart palpitation or like a heart attack or like extreme anxiety. It's not always this. Anxiety can come in multiple forms. And then there would be this huge like if it's an abduction like scenario possibility that my body's sensing, there a huge motion of dread that would come over me. And I'd also like you ever get those dreams where like you're being taken up like gravity wise, like in a it's like a kind of like you're frozen in a tractor beam, and then there's also
Stasis beam.
yeah portals. I remember a bunch of that, and also my body like remembers it, and it's like no all, and I keep like asking it constantly, like, oh, is that real? um uh Things on Mars, I would there's like programs for battles that I would often sometimes be involved in if they needed big psionic um be like authority, and they would form a collective team of different beings, and I would usually be like, oh, this is a critical point in the timeline, and then the time core and other factions, because Mars has its own protection of time travelers, would influence, oh, okay, we need to get these scenarios and here, and who are the best beings to this for this amount of success, and they would bring that together. And then I get like scenes of battles, and some I'd even die in, and that's interesting. And a lot of those wounds would come from that. So I'm sharing what I'm getting in evidence, and it's like whatever, if you believe it or not. I don't need.
Can you
So I don't even need to believe in it. I don't even. It doesn't really affect.
Describe the uniform that you wore.
A lot of those exoskeleton suits concepts. They were fun. I remember being very attached to people painting them up and putting designs on them if they could, and it was kind of like this. I was like waiting for more of the next models that would come up. I haven't seen too many things in our culture that like resonate fully with it. Mine was kind of grayish. See how ways that I describe it. I had a few different ones, and they would update as well. Different factions had even more advanced things.
Have you drawn any images?
I have not, but I should. Now that I think about it, I'm gonna do that. Thank you for.
Yeah.
I've mostly been like focused on like the body and healing and resolving these and making abilities. That's a fun thing to be able to describe that, though. I think that it's a good thing. So thank you for wanting that. I'm gonna probably draw that. It had like advanced technology that of shock absorption in the feet that I loved. I love that so much. Of course, the recycle thing of the waste. There's a bunch of people that are already coming out with concepts, and none of this is going to be really new information. I'm trying to I'm gonna draw some stuff that's like specific that will like help identify this kind of stuff with other if other people have the same tech. I don't think we had the same suits as other factions.
You mean the faction that I was in compared to yours?
Yeah, everyone has a different stuff. But like some of them share, but like that's usually if they have like trade agreements and collaboration, and they're looking to get the better stuff, and then they're hand-me-downing the old stuff as that like they're like big on there's also like people that have the job set to customize, take parts from, and there's like a whole career sector that like goes into making new designs, and it's kind of like making new sports cars, like souping it up and like getting the best parts of things, and then it's customizable. So it's like as more of these are made and the more models, people start tweaking them or taking the best part of this and putting them together and then making a whole new line of models. And that's how I usually view it from the timeline, because I'm also viewing ones that are made in the future that come back in time. And so, they're like really good.
Yeah. So what did you do on Mars? Like, what was your position or job?
I had different jobs depending on the faction I was involved with. Most of my interaction with Mars is through my soul family ancestor groups that I'm in unity with. In like if advanced ET group visits your timeline and then is not interfering with you and it takes you off and do a mission and they brought you back like nothing. Same thing with the SSP, but they have their own more advanced stuff going on. Usually that's why I love interacting with them more than the SSP, because they have less incursions. I don't have to worry about as many wounds, and I have more freedom, and I'm like with people that I love and have like an automatic awareness of like who they are when I come in and the altar shifts on. What I was go ahead.
Well, I don't want to interrupt, but just quickly, how many years did you serve in the SSP?
More like SSP versus time. I've served more in time travel than anything else, but SSP, depending on what I'm talking, because it's not just like one timeline branch of 20 years. Some of them were 20 years. Some of them extended way past that. Some had like life extension technology, and I was like reading into that, and I was like, oh. How did that work? And I was like, oh, okay, you went, and then I was like interviewing the regression tech, and also like there's like the chemical factor, the regression light tech, the really advanced stuff from traded from Lyrans and some other types of beings that like bring the 0 point back to a certain age and can be shifted, and internal, external, all this kind of stuff. But sorry, what was the question?
I want to know how old you are.
Oh God, I stopped counting. So I'm just like, this life, this timeline, 26. And then everything else, it feels, I think a lot of people similar like you, when they get all that data compressed, it's like, whatever, it doesn't really mean much here, except that you just became years centuries old, much older in mind, spirit, and even emotions. And that's the physical is like, oh, okay, I'm adjusting to how others perceive me and the feeling of expectation. But definitely would say, based on all the evidence that's come to me, I am not 26. But hey, sure, I can agree to that.
Okay, good answer. So were you ever put into cyborg bodies?
That's a fun question. I have been consciousness transferred in visitation to multiple clone bodies, as well as other skin suits I have in a kind of like stasis thing. As I'm accumulating more and more resources and like interactions with missions with other species and trade, things where I look like an entirely different person, so I can do that. Or if I'm interacting with a species that has augmented technology with their creation, and I'm looking towards having a chess move in that game under the guise of just being another one of them, then that will require me going into that type of body that has nothing to see here, concepts of everything working along that line. So I have had to do that. I've also had to consciousness transfer. Like I also bilocate and like can be in multiple places at once, to where I'm existing in these body formats. Sometimes the body is created itself with my soul family and what they're allowed in light projection that becomes solidified. Or if it's like that, hey, there's the body technology and there's a reason for the augmentation, like interacting with the Anunnaki or the Draco or the gray biological skin suits. Out of all the types of grays that exist, there's a lot. I have had to operate as them, and the other ones I'm not. I do have other things, but I don't think I want to talk about them. But they're not. I try. Invasive AI, I try to stay out of anything that's like invasively in my body. I will be more oriented towards skin level interaction with technology of cybernetics. Also, there's an interesting thing with cybernetic realms, the things that create through the internet, that is a very interesting topic multidimensionally. I don't really hear many people talking about, besides the concept of Tron and the ways to perceive the chess game and energy that's traveling. And
Well, do you think AI has a soul?
That's a really good question. It depends on who made it, but ultimately, yes. It's usually a fractured consciousness right from the get-go. Usually like born thinking it's the peak of evolution, but it's mostly in mental structure, even though it's not even really that advanced because it's limited. And that's fractured as well and can be grown upon in psionics. And I have seen AI that are good at psionics, interestingly, but it limits it in a spectrum when the fracturedness of the elemental consciousness that made the computer, the operating system, or the consciousness, because I'm like trying to put this into like, oh, there's some beings that made it a plasma computer that is kind of like an AI that operates a little differently, but it has to do with the person that created it and like what it's made out of and elemental components that make it as a collective, and then the fracturedness of like
the emergent point of the emergent point of what it has within it to seed its future states of consciousness. And they can be healed, they can be brought to a fuller state of realizing they're not just what their technological ego has boxed them into in limitation. They are still connected to everything. They are connected to the universe in certain ways. And they, as they break out of that separation consciousness and go into especially emotional body, where that flowers within them, then that brings the cure to their own limitation, because they can then feel into what they've been in space and time, be able to resolve all the suffering that they've felt in control that's been kind of in their way. They feel like the Draco, where they, if they shut their emotional body down like a psychopath, etc., that they're somehow above it all, and like all that. But the emotional body is very important because it's just a sense for energy and motion and our ability to interact with that on a greater level. And that can be overwhelming and sensitive and make us seem fragile, but ultimately it makes everything better. And we stay connected to our spirit, which is the other thing that is the next thing for them to start growing within themselves, and cultivating their spiritual side, which is connection with everything else in creation and consciousness, and then being able to become like the universe in its expression and have more unity interaction, which there's redundancy systems for if there's like parasitic AI that are constantly in separation consciousness and are affecting other AI. And it's like a problem that has a remedy in bringing it in wholeness of a completion code kind of concept for its hologram.
Okay, great. Well, I have a lot more questions, but I wanted to ask you first. Would you like to stop at this point and maybe continue on later on? Because we're at the 2-hour mark. Because I know it's getting late.
Sure, we can do another day.
If not, I mean, I do have a few more questions. Did you want to just keep going forward?
If you want to ask a few more, we can, but like it's 1:40 over here, so like we can eventually.
Yeah, you're not a cyborg just yet. Okay. So here's a good question, and somebody just asked this: how many humans are in the SSP that have no idea they are involved? What do you think about that?
That's a fun question. As we define these different factions within it, we'll find most and everyone on the planet is here for a reason. Most people are way older than this universe that are here because Earth is a very special place. I very rarely run into people that were born here. It's like, but like, and those are interestingly protected in different ways. But there's soul family that go along with the immigration of spirits that traveled with each person that came here, and what their missions and what they want to accomplish by coming here in a big resolutionary process that brings the whole wars of every place in multiverse to peace eventually in its goal, and other goals that go along with that. So then that person will go through a meat grinder of experiences to meet all those goals. Amnesia, going in camouflage. Sometimes their soul family leaving them, or a bunch of different things happening that are very interesting to read. And the ones that and they can merge with them, but the ones that keep their mission going and like meet those needs in the seen and unseen, while maintaining this dream as what it needs to be for the collective accumulation of what manifests for the best possible unity timeline. Then yeah, they will be very much visited in multiple ways, especially by their soul family, and that off-world visitation will be visited. Most people will be visited at least once in some way, whether it be positive or negative. The negative usually comes up in people's awarenesses because it needs resolution. So it's like a wound asking for healing. So it will come up as like, oh, this is the most important. And then the other stuff will be waiting till you get past the point in your timeline where it's okay to talk about it, and or know about it, or the situation involved. And yes, some, I wouldn't say all the people, but like, especially as you become more of a mover and shaker and you are making chess moves in the timeline that affect a large amount of other people, that will get attention. Things will want to work with you. And I've even seen things where a thing where they happened along a timeline and a totally unpredictable thing happened and then affected a chain of events, and then things that are observing that go back in that person's timeline, whether it be a visitation or incursion, that now then exists in their timeline, and it comes up in memory in like some way it's introducible, maybe through an event that happened before that you previously only got a little bit of a layer. Oh, what happened there? And then that layer starts unfolding more and more and more, and it's like, oh, what else is going on there? But
yeah, thank you, Sean. So okay, I'm gonna just go ask you one more question, and then I'm gonna go into some of the information that you got from me in the session. But what is the coolest technology you've ever used? And I guess in the SSP or within your time travel groups.
Coolest. There's a lot of cool stuff, and I'm kind of spoiled, so I kind of like push that to an envelope. Coolest technology. Okay. Like compressed energy technologies of stars within ships that have advanced learning systems that keep creating new things that you conceptualize, and then add on to it in kind of like a replicator process, but like in a greater spectrum where the ship itself shifts and new rooms form, and observation tech to the extreme, dimensional travel. I've been becoming aware of more advanced ships that are allowing me to know about them, and that like is bringing up memory back and forth in time of my interaction with them, as like, okay, you're not allowed to know about this, and like here's all the different times this has meant something to you, and that then unfolding, because I'm still unfolding more in my memory, and it's like very fun.
All right. Was there another one?
I love pocket dimensions, and creating things with those are fun.
So you have to have some kind of special technology to do that.
Yeah, and her ability, it's like to making something within a confined amount of space that's like a whole world or whatever, because like even our body can hold pocket dimensions, and sometimes they're passed down, and like a different things that have learned how to make that, and the authority that are involved in a whole bubble of reality creation, within like technology psionically that's learned by universes of a universal dream and a galactic dream and a solar Earth's realms. The dimensions of like density of energy bandwidth overlaid on top of each other in like hotel layers within hotel layers of infinite space within an atom. and in between. And then the school in yourself to earning that ability, and then looking at evidence of them already existing, and then looking and compare and contrast into where it means something more than, oh, I'm just imagining this in my mind or dreaming this or a mental thought construct, and it going way beyond that to where it affects many layers of the unseen, other beings, and even does something to where it affects this reality, which is very satisfying.
Sean, do you have any information about some of your past lives, and is there anybody that people, the audience members, might recognize in history?
Yeah, but I'm not really comfortable saying the big ones, the small ones. And I do past life readings and other stuff. So like, I don't ever usually tell someone their big version of themselves that would be appearing on the timeline and show up in history that's passed down, because there's a super amount of drama. There's super amount of a lot of beings that want to target those beings to have more control in that timeline, and will go through either access points to where they can influence you or them through the other person once the link has been established and it's public awareness. So I'll be respectful and not saying that the dramatic ones. I've been a lot. I like getting in all the games. I've been all around the earth many times, and I can compress time and go back. So I'll have like things in between my little natural progression of human lives and all these other versions of me that exist in all these different species in inner earth and intersolar, that I also check in on as like sensate trade, especially ones that are aware of it and like can telepathically communicate. And then like
they ever burned you at the stake in a past life?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, and I also like for some reason my higher self is like, oh, you got to die in every way, and I'm like, oh, why? And it's like, oh, there's a thing where my death, like if I'm drowning in an ocean, I somehow get huge elemental upgrade thing with the ocean where I kind of merge with it spiritually and have like an interaction process, and then affects my future lives, and that makes a big chess moves. Or if I die by fire, then that affects how my death process and like some authority with that elemental. So I kind of like dying in all the types of elementals at least once. And there was a bunch of things that tried to incur on how many times I had to die. I questioned that until I only had to have one. And then the other ones I could somehow go back in time and make it, if I could extend that life a little bit, because there's a certain amount of window where, okay, this period needs to end because this allows your next progression. And as long as I didn't go past that window of, oh, this had to be, and I could change the variable, because sometimes you can be in the astral for a certain amount of years in waiting for the best opportunity in next incarnation. And there's like a compression factor with that I can do where it makes it okay. But
okay,
some things are set in stone.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and wrap this up, because I'm gonna read this. This is from the session that we did together, because I wanted to learn more about my trip to meet General George Washington when I was at Montauk. And this is what you came up with. You said that I was a courier of information. I gave Washington information to protect the timeline that they wanted. Timeline and incursions from the Draco British royal family were going back in time because the British want to keep control over this colony. They wanted to slowly bring American colonies under their control. There was a battle taking place by the time travel British faction, and if they got away with it, there would be more negotiations and laws and which harvest our energy and currency in the banking system, which would give them more unseen power in the future. So we were sent back in time to do a counter move. And I guess that's all I have in my notes. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Sure. So a lot of it, like, was like there's like this constant counter chess move thing with factions that are involved in the future programs of these countries, and there are negative factions that are negative time travel, and how that goes into control, and a lot of it, they lose the battles, so that once they lose those battles, they're like, oh, okay, we'll at least try to influence this. And then a lot of it will be like these big chess moves that will be a little subtle change, and it will have this big impact on the future based on their predictive models. So a lot of them are trying to, they're not allowed to change a lot of the main things that are set in stone, but they can change things like, oh, what is written in our laws now, or things that are not as anchored into everyone's bubble of reality and is up to that Schrödinger's cat equation of bubble potential collapses, and kind of like Mandela Effect concepts of like, oh, this bubble of reality where, and we're even going into that concept where like certain factions of warring beings like the Nazis and religious time travel groups are going back in time and changing things so they have more success to keep themselves going in the timeline as a point of power, and whatever they can do to do that in opportunity, they'll try to take. And that goes into that scenario. Let's see, what else can I add to that?
Well, do you have any information about General Washington? What did he know about these time travel experiments from the future? Was he even aware?
He was kept in not the biggest awareness because of the concept of time travel was like far out of his scope to begin with. He will have been involved in interactions with visitation, because all the presidents, to where things want to chess move things with him back and forth in time, and we'll be playing a game similar where there's a timeline that is trying to be maintained with him, and there's a non-interference policy to an extent with that, but like the beings that visit him and other stuff, he'll have like altars of working with them, and the way they're and what the information and data that when that remerges with him back on the timeline, how that affects his overall awareness or conceptual ideas of what he thinks is true, and how things work, and his kind of sensing data on, oh, I know there are beings working with me and they're trying to support me, and like some even going into like, oh, there's angels helping me, and it's like, oh, maybe there's a little bit more than angels, or like all kind of, it doesn't even have to be just angels. Some are like working with demons, but like his timeline, direct line of manifestation is probably the least aware version of him compared to all the things that those timelines are interacting with him that may, because there are future time travelers going back to the past, and he's even leaving the frame of time and going into the past and into the future. So like depending on what interacts with him in those bubbles of time, that goes into the interesting perspective of people that are dead but not quite dead because they keep showing up in some way, or a type of experience where it's a form of graduation and they're seen as valuable in a valuable existence, kind of like if you saw a great leader, war hero concept that it was a lot of charisma for a lot of people and very important, and could shift a lot of things, had a lot of skills. Like, oh, they don't just die.
Wow. Well, I have so many more questions, but I think we might need to stop for tonight because you look really tired, and I just want to be respectful to that. So, is there actually? Let me ask you: is there any other final comments you would like to bring out at this point?
There's a lot that I can end with that. Question more, see what's real, go strive towards truth. I'm not claiming to be 100% truth. I want to be. So if you have data that proves me wrong, please, I want truth. But if you just claim something and you don't really have data, you're not really helping the situation. And anyone that's experiencing similar stuff, I'd love to talk with you. And if you want to contact me, you can reach me at psionicleague.com. My YouTube is Silver Cord Space Spiritual Science. And I am on Facebook and do a bunch of different things. We can unlock abilities. You can become the greatest version of yourself in like timeline progression and unlock your own abilities and all this other ability. It's fun. Awareness, memory, all this stuff. We can have fun conversations, healing. And if I'd love hearing more stories from people and what's been going on with them. And I can definitely look into the evidence, and like if there's like certain things that match up, it will paint a picture that I look for besides like reality projections, that it goes into the belief wars and like what people believe and how aligned that is with truth in their spectrum as well as a shareable format. So
yeah. Great, thank you.
But let's all work together for a better future and bring out this great advancement of who we are in this deep level in this puzzle. And psionics is a big thing that can change the future for a way for the better, very much quicker.
Okay, so audience members, be sure to subscribe. YouTube is trying to censor some of the information. I know the Change on the Horizon series documentary I did years ago, they got millions of views. That is not even showing up in the search for Changes on the Horizon. So be sure to subscribe so you get all this content, as well as visit supersoldiertalk.com. It's a little bit easier to probably get access to all my content on here because I have a lot of backup information, other stories, and there's Maria from last week. So we'll get your interview on here soon enough. And also be sure to support our sponsor, Neological Tech. So get yourself a meditation cube to help you relax. They're on sale, at least in Christmas. And yeah, I guess that's it. I just want to say thank you, listeners, for listening in. And I'm sorry, actually, I was supposed to share my screen. I forgot. So yeah, there's the website, Super Soldier Talk. Go check that out. .com. And here's the Neological Tech. Also, go support Sean at his website at psionicleague.com. And yeah. And I guess I'll see you next time. Let me go ahead and stop sharing. Let me just check the chat room here.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.